They say in the world of design, your ideas are your signature. But what happens when someone else signs their name over yours, and the world believes it? Seattle was gray that morning, the kind of cold that clung to your sleeves and slipped down your collar. Elena Rivera arrived at Verona Innovations 15 minutes before her usual time, hoping to enjoy a quiet start to her day. The office was still waking up, the hum of printers and distant voices barely filling the concrete and glass space. But what greeted Elena wasn't silence. It was whispers, urgent, sharp, and followed by glances in her direction. Tanya, the receptionist, stood unusually stiff at her desk. She gave Elena a quick smile, the kind that trembled with something unspoken. Elena paused, brows furrowing. Something was off. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Marcus Chen, her longtime colleague and the only one she truly trusted. Emergency meeting. 9 a.m. You should see the email Lena sent last night. Elena's stomach tightened. She opened her inbox. There it was. A formal invitation to a firm-wide meeting, subject line. Strategic leap forward. Urban Core Partnership reveal. Beneath that, a forwarded thread. From Lena Harwood to Gregory Stone, the firm's founder. Elena's eyes scanned the contents, and her heart began to hammer. Diagrams, models, even color-coded strategy outlines. Her outlines, attached to an email signed by Lena, praising herself for the entire vision. There was no mention of Elena anywhere. She staggered back into her chair, reading it again. Her Portland Harbor greenspace design, something she had been working on privately for months, was there. Rendered in polished detail. But it was stripped of her annotations. Name. Her context. Instead, it was wrapped in corporate polish and pitched to Urban Core as a collaborative breakthrough led by Lena Harwood. Elena couldn't breathe. For 8 years, she had built her name at Verona. Joining as a senior project architect, she had traded a leadership offer at a Boston firm for the chance to lead sustainable urban innovation in Seattle. She had mentored teams, guided award-winning builds, and brought vision to crumbling city corners. She had done it all while avoiding internal politics, letting her work speak louder than her voice. But this was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated theft. And it wasn't the first time. Lena had arrived just 3 years ago, sharp, polished, and full of rehearsed admiration. At first she seemed curious, always asking questions, eager to learn. Elena had taken it as flattery. She'd let her shadow meetings, offered insight, showed process. But soon, Elena began noticing strange patterns. Her language mirrored in Lena's presentations. Her models echoed in Lena's drafts. And slowly Lena's star rose within Verona. But this time Lena hadn't just mimicked. She had stolen. Elena reached into her drawer and pulled out her black external hard drive. Inside was everything. Original concepts, dated sketches, email exchanges, even time-stamped video recordings of her work sessions at home. She hadn't created these backups out of paranoia, but instinct. Something in her had long whispered that Lena was not what she seemed. The clock ticked toward 9. As she walked into the main conference room, Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the glass wall. She didn't look betrayed. She looked composed and determined. But inside, her blood surged with cold fury. The room was packed. Executives, partners, associates, city representatives from Portland, even a few media guests. At the front, Gregory Stone stood beside Lena, who wore a crisp navy blazer and that smile Elena had come to dread, the one that curled only when something was already hers. Gregory began. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a turning point. Our strategic partnership with Urban Core is built upon a bold new vision, led by our very own Lena Harwood. Her groundbreaking design for the Portland waterfront project has already captured national attention. Applause erupted. Lena stepped forward, clicking the remote. Elena's sketches, her vision, flashed across the screen. As you can see, Lena said smoothly, we've incorporated flexible green zones, elevated pathways for seasonal flooding, and community pods built with reclaimed materials. This approach not only meets sustainability benchmarks but reinvents urban shoreline design. Elena's jaw clenched. Every line, every node, every sustainability measure she had crafted alone. And Lena was performing it like a well-rehearsed script. Beside her, Marcus leaned in and whispered, "We need to talk. I think you're being set up." Elena didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the presentation. There, in the final slide, was a proposal to appoint Lena as Verona's new chief creative officer, effective immediately. The room rose to applaud again. Lena smiled wide. But when her eyes met Elena's, there was no surprise, only warning. Outside the room, Elena's hand trembled as she gripped her hard drive tighter. She had proof. She had time. What she didn't have yet was a plan. But by tomorrow that would change. The applause still echoed in Elena's ears as she walked down the corridor, her heels striking the floor in measured defiance. Behind her, the celebration continued. But in her chest, it felt like a funeral drumbeat. She entered the empty materials library, a quiet haven lined with sample books and fabric swatches, and closed the door behind her. She sank into the leather bench beneath the wide industrial window and opened her laptop. The hard drive clicked softly as it connected. She navigated through folders labeled by year and project name, stopping at one she had buried deeply. Port Harbor Private. Inside, hundreds of files, sketches, 3D renders, video screen recordings of her creating those models in real time, voice memos where she brainstormed after late-night inspiration, even a time-stamped folder containing her trip to the shoreline, where she took reference photos of the tide line, the shadow play of the docks, the broken benches she dreamed of redesigning. It was all here, the entire birth of the Portland vision. Months before Lena ever spoke the word harbor. And that's when she saw it. A folder she didn't create. It was labeled Sync 2024 Q2. She clicked it open. Inside were versions of her renderings, but with Lena's initials at the file creation tag. Modified dates had been altered. But something was wrong. Elena, meticulous as always, had embedded a digital watermark system into her private drafts, a small feature built by her friend Marcus years ago, used for version control. Each real file contained a hidden code linking it back to her machine and timestamp. The forgeries were slick, but they were not invisible. She had her smoking gun. Marcus knocked gently on the library door before slipping inside. His face taut with urgency. "We have a problem," he said quietly, sliding the lock behind him. "Bigger than I thought." Elena turned her laptop to him and pointed. "She tried to modify my originals, but my watermark system caught it." "That's good," he said, relieved. "Because after you left the room, Gregory pulled me aside. He asked if I ever saw you working on the Portland concept." He spooked. "I think someone from Urban Core is asking technical questions Lena can't answer." Elena's pulse quickened. "She's cracking." Marcus nodded. "Also, Tanya found something. Old internal emails, flagged by the system as suspicious. They're from your account, but she says they were sent during your Vancouver trip last month. The ones where Lena now claims you shared project data externally." Elena's breath caught. "Deep fake emails." Marcus lowered his voice. "Or someone with direct access to your credentials." Which Lena had, right? Elena nodded slowly. "She stayed late 2 nights before I left. Borrowed my login to test a render. She said hers crashed." "Convenient," Marcus muttered. They both sat still for a moment, the weight of it thick between them. Elena looked back at her screen. "I'm going to build a file. Something undeniable. Timeline. Metadata. Video proofs. The whole trail." "And what will you do with it?" Marcus asked. She looked up, her expression hard. "I'm going to show the truth. But not yet. Not until she can't twist it." The door opened a crack. Tanya slipped inside, her face pale. Lena just walked into Gregory's office. She had a printed folder. "I think she's submitting something official against you." Elena stood. "She wants to finish this before I can speak." Then we need to act fast, Marcus said. I'll get the server logs from your trip dates. Tanya, find anything on file ownership records. Elena, you focus on the visuals. They all moved like clockwork, years of working together morphing into a silent alliance. But across the office, Lena sat with a glass of still water in her hand and a rehearsed look of sadness on her face. I hate that it's come to this, she told Gregory, placing the folder in front of him. But I believe Elena may have violated client confidentiality. These emails speak for themselves. Gregory opened the file. It was convincing. Doctored emails, system logs, her performance evaluations marked down in small, handwritten notes. He looked up slowly. This is serious, Lena. She nodded. And I hope it's handled discreetly. For the firm's reputation. But she didn't count on the very system she used to betray Elena turning against her. The internal server timestamped every login. The watermark tags in the files couldn't be faked. And the Portland development team. They were requesting a technical Q&A next week, with the original architect. Lena had started a fire. But it was Elena who had the map to the flame's origin. As the sun began to set behind the skyline, casting long shadows into the studio, Elena zipped her bag shut and stood tall. The reckoning had begun. The next morning, Seattle was soaked in rain. The kind that pounded against the windows in relentless rhythm, drowning out the noise inside the office. Elena sat in a small cafe 2 blocks from Verona Innovations, her laptop open, headphones in, her focus razor-sharp. She had barely touched her coffee. She was reviewing server access logs Marcus had pulled overnight, proof that her user credentials had been used on days she was not in the city. And those logins had downloaded project files with file names Lena presented as her own. The trail was meticulous and damning. A ping interrupted her train of thought. A new email, this time from Victor Langston, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Urban Core. Subject: Follow up on Portland concept presentation. She read it twice. Then again. Victor was requesting a meeting. But this time without Lena. Urban Core wanted clarification on several technical and structural inconsistencies they had noticed during Lena's last presentation. Apparently, when pressed about environmental resilience metrics, Lena deflected. When asked about design rationale, she became vague. They were suspicious. And Elena, as the supposed silent contributor Lena had name-dropped as a former mentor, was now their point of curiosity. Victor's final line struck her like lightning. If you are available, we would be grateful for a private consultation. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. This could change everything. But she also knew the trap hidden beneath that sentence. If she took the meeting without clearance, Lena could twist it, paint her as a disgruntled ex-employee leaking confidential material. She could lose any legal standing she still had. Karen had already tried it in reverse. Elena wouldn't hand her the real ammunition now. She texted Marcus. Urban Core wants to talk. Off the record. I'm not biting. But this means cracks are forming. He replied immediately. Then it's time to prepare your strike. Elena pulled out a notepad and started mapping every connection. The design timeline. Emails where Lena referenced her. Server logs Marcus retrieved. Even receipts from the exact days Lena had supposedly led design meetings, while Elena had been in Vancouver with GPS-tagged photos to prove it. But she needed something stronger. Something public. Her eyes narrowed. The City of Portland's Public Development Office. The proposal had been made with government support, which meant records were open, and so were meeting minutes. If Lena had misrepresented authorship, there would be traces. And if those officials had doubts, Elena could become the voice they'd been waiting for. That afternoon, Tanya quietly slipped a USB into Elena's hand as they crossed in the hallway. Security footage, she whispered. You didn't hear it from me. Elena clicked the USB into her laptop. The file dated back to the week of her vacation. It showed Lena in her office, alone, using Elena's computer. She had even left her bag in view, clearly visible, labeled with her initials. At 10:13 p.m., Lena inserted her own USB. 30 minutes later, she exited. It was the final puzzle piece. She hadn't just mirrored Elena's work. She had extracted it. By the next morning, Elena's dossier was complete. It contained time-stamped video files of the design process, metadata logs proving she was the original creator, access logs of Lena using her computer without permission, altered email chains compared against the real server logs, internal camera footage from the office during the alleged leak, third-party testimonials from clients and colleagues, and a forgotten gem, a voice memo from Lena herself from a brainstorming session saying, "I'll never figure out how you thought of that green flood corridor. That's genius, Elena." The voice was unmistakable. As she packaged the folder into a digital brief, a notification appeared. Asterisk all staff meeting tomorrow. 10 a.m. mandatory attendance. Asterisk. Elena's lips parted in disbelief. She clicked the details. Announcement of creative leadership realignment. So Lena was making her move final. This was it. She stood from her desk, closed her laptop, and glanced once across the office to where Lena sat surrounded by fresh interns, smiling, basking in borrowed brilliance. But tomorrow, Elena would walk into that meeting with more than words. She'd walk in with truth. And truth, when undeniable, is heavier than a lie can carry. Rain still whispered against the windows as the team gathered in the main conference room at Verona Innovations. The walls, usually lined with vibrant concept boards, now displayed only one thing: a massive projector screen with the Verona and Urban Core logos fused side by side. Beneath it, a podium. 2 rows of chairs filled rapidly. Everyone had been summoned. No one knew exactly why. Elena arrived early. She took a seat near the far end of the front row, hard drive in her bag, printed dossier at her side. Her breath was steady, her eyes calm. The storm inside her had passed. Now there was only resolve. Lena entered 15 minutes late, intentionally, flanked by 2 interns carrying boxes. She smiled as she passed Elena, her expression tight and rehearsed, as if to say, "Enjoy the view while you can." She took her place beside Gregory Stone at the podium. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at the cuff of his shirt, jaw clenched. Lena noticed. Across from them, Victor Langston and a senior planner from Portland's development office sat with composed expressions. Their presence was new, unannounced, and strategic. Gregory stood first. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice heavy with formality. "Today we're here to announce the finalization of our partnership with Urban Core, and the official promotion of Lena Harwood as Verona's Chief Creative Officer, effective immediately." Applause scattered weakly through the room. Lena stepped forward, her confidence practiced. "Thank you, Gregory. And thank you all. This project has been the culmination of months of innovation, sleepless nights, and hard decisions. I'm proud of what we've built, and I'm excited to carry Verona into this next chapter." She turned slightly, nodding to Victor. "Urban Core has been an extraordinary collaborator. Their belief in this vision reflects our shared values." Victor returned the nod but didn't smile. The Portland planner cleared her throat. "Before we proceed," she said, "we'd like to request a quick review of the origin story behind the design, particularly the green flood corridor and modular waterfront elements. We were hoping Ms. Harwood could walk us through the technical basis of those features." Lena blinked, then smiled. "Of course. The flood corridor was designed to redirect seasonal overflow into modular retention basins, preserving walkable terrain and mitigating erosion. We sourced this from a comparative study I led on Amsterdam's tidal defenses." Victor tilted his head. "And the source documentation? We couldn't locate the study in the shared database." Lena hesitated. "It's in my personal research files," she said. Gregory's brow furrowed. "Perhaps it would help," Victor said, "if we heard from Ms. Rivera. We understand she was involved in the early concept phase." All eyes turned. Elena stood slowly. "Not involved," she said clearly. Responsible. I designed those features over 6 months ago. Independently. Before they were ever discussed in a Verona meeting. I have proof. Lena laughed low and sharp. She's upset. We've discussed this. Let her speak, Gregory said firmly. Elena walked to the projector, connected her laptop. The room dimmed. For the next 20 minutes, she laid it bare. A video screen recording of her building the models, dated and time-stamped. Voice memos narrating her design thinking in real time. Server logs showing Lena's unauthorized access to her machine. Side-by-side comparisons of the forged files with altered metadata. The internal security footage showing Lena entering Elena's office with a USB. And finally the voice memo. Lena's own words, praising the flood corridor concept Elena created. Her voice, her tone, her unwitting confession. Silence followed. Victor turned to Lena. You said this was a collaborative effort. That Elena merely supported your work. Lena's mouth opened, but no words came. Her skin had lost all color. Gregory slowly removed his glasses. Lena, is any of this true? Lena swallowed hard. She's manipulating it. You don't understand. This is revenge. She was about to be terminated. I was being terminated, Elena interrupted. Based on forged emails and a fabricated performance review. I have the originals. And several witnesses who can confirm the discrepancies. Tanya stepped forward from the back. I saw those emails. They were planted. Marcus stood beside her. And I pulled the logs. She used Elena's credentials while she was on vacation. Gregory stood in stunned silence. The Portland planner stood. We'll be suspending all discussions regarding the project until proper authorship is confirmed, she said. We cannot move forward with compromised documentation. Victor Langston rose beside her. Urban Core will not participate in a partnership built on misrepresentation. Elena, we would still like to speak with you. Separately. Lena stepped back, breath shaking. You can't do this. Gregory raised a hand. You need to leave the room, Lena. The room didn't move. The weight of the truth had rooted everyone in place. Lena's heels echoed loudly as she turned and walked out. The door closed behind her. Gregory turned to Elena. His expression weary. We owe you an apology. Elena met his eyes. You owe me a correction. And the room understood that the storm wasn't just outside the window anymore. It had passed through Verona. And left only truth in its wake. By the time the meeting room emptied, a stillness had settled over Verona Innovations. It wasn't the kind of silence born of peace, but of realization. Everything had changed. Desks were occupied but quiet, keyboards moved slowly, and eyes no longer looked up when footsteps passed. In the corner office, Gregory Stone sat motionless, staring at the closed door Lena had exited through less than an hour ago. The documents Elena left on the table remained untouched, but their weight lingered like smoke. Elena didn't return to her desk. Instead, she stepped outside into the misty Seattle air, her breath visible against the damp breeze. Her fingers trembled as she dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Her mother answered. Elena, I need to hear your voice, Elena said, holding back emotion she hadn't allowed in days. What's wrong? Nothing, she whispered. Everything. It's finally happening. Elena hung up before she said too much. There were still pieces to move. She wasn't finished. Not yet. Back inside, Gregory called a board meeting within the hour. By then word had spread. Tanya had whispered the truth to a few department heads. Marcus had shown the server logs to IT. The air shifted from tension to quiet support. But Gregory wasn't acting out of guilt. He was acting out of fear. Verona's name had nearly been attached to a government-level fraud scandal. Urban Core could still go public. And worse, the city of Portland might open a formal investigation. The only way forward was swift and clean. He drafted a retraction email. Subject line. Correction of project attribution and internal restructuring. Elena read the draft 2 hours later. It was clear, professional, almost apologetic. But she didn't respond. Instead, she walked straight into Gregory's office. "I appreciate the gesture," she said. "But this isn't enough." He looked up wary. "What do you want?" "A signed statement," she said. "On record. From the board. Confirming my sole authorship of the Portland design. And rescinding the false performance report that led to my dismissal." Gregory hesitated. "And my job," she added, "wasn't just wrongly taken. Needs to be reinstated. With full title, full authority, and publicly acknowledged." "That may be difficult," he said cautiously. Elena placed a printed folder on his desk. "These are copies of my emails with city officials. They're asking for a formal statement from Verona about authorship. If I say nothing, the project remains frozen. If I say everything, it could destroy your firm." Gregory exhaled slowly. "You're threatening me." "I'm offering clarity," she said, meeting his gaze. "For both of us." The next morning, the official statement went out. Effective immediately, Elena Rivera is reinstated as Verona's Director of Urban Design. All prior allegations against her have been fully investigated and dismissed. The Portland waterfront project is attributed solely to her vision and execution. Lena Harwood has resigned from her position, effective immediately. The company-wide email landed like thunder. Elena received a dozen quiet messages of support, a few apologies, and one email from a junior architect named Isabel. "I've been watching how you handled this. Thank you. For fighting back. For reminding us that our ideas matter." But Elena didn't reply. Not yet. Later that week, Victor Langston reached out again. This time, he invited Elena to speak directly at the Urban Core Summit in San Francisco. Keynote session. Topic: Resilient Cities and Ethical Design Practices. At first, she thought of declining. But then she remembered the way Lena had stood at that podium. Confident, applauded, lying. And Elena knew the importance of showing the world what truth looked like when it spoke. She said yes. Meanwhile, Gregory called a staff meeting. He stood before the team with tired eyes. "I failed to protect the people who built this place," he said. "And I won't repeat that mistake." Then, for the first time in company history, Verona Innovations announced the implementation of a new attribution protocol. All projects moving forward would be logged with collaborative authorship records, backup, watermarks, formal acknowledgement lines. It wasn't enough to change the past, but it would protect the future. Elena sat quietly in the back of the room, watching a culture shift begin. She didn't smile. Not yet. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it might happen. The world had heard her voice. And it wasn't done listening. 2 weeks later, Elena stood behind the heavy velvet curtain at the Urban Core Summit in San Francisco. Her fingers wrapped tightly around a flash drive tucked in her palm. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation beyond the stage. Architects, civic planners, engineers, investors, all seated and waiting for the next keynote. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed through the space. "Our next speaker is someone whose recent journey has sparked conversations across our industry. Please welcome Elena Rivera, Director of Urban Design at Verona Innovations." The applause was polite, restrained, uncertain. Most of them had heard whispers, rumors of corporate sabotage and a stolen design. But few knew the truth. Elena stepped into the spotlight. The moment she reached the podium, her eyes swept over the room. Dozens of unfamiliar faces. No Lena. No Gregory. No Verona politics. Just strangers. And the weight of a story that was hers alone. She exhaled. "I never intended to be here," she began, voice steady. "In fact, if everything had gone as planned, someone else would be giving this talk, presenting ideas that weren't theirs." A murmur passed through the audience. Elena continued. "In our world, design is more than aesthetics. It's vision, integrity, accountability. But what happens when the ideas we create are taken, not by outsiders but from within. She paused, letting the question settle. Over the next 20 minutes, Elena walked them through her real experience. Not the headline version but the lived version. The silence of being erased. The moment of betrayal. The choice to fight, even when the cost seemed unbearable. She showed the evolution of the Portland waterfront project. Her original sketches, photos, renderings. She explained not just what the designs did, but why they mattered. How they were born from a storm-damaged childhood home in San Juan, from long afternoons imagining what a safe, beautiful city could be. When she finished, the room stood in silence. Then they rose. A full standing ovation. Backstage, Victor met her with a quiet nod. "You didn't just share a design," he said. "You shared a truth most people are too scared to admit exists." That night, Elena returned to her hotel room alone. She laid the flash drive on the desk and stared at it. It held everything, her designs, her memos, even the footage of Lena copying her files. But she didn't feel satisfaction. She felt emptied. Vindication was a strange reward. The following day, her inbox overflowed. Invitations to speak, collaborate, consult. Universities requesting interviews. A city in Norway asking to license her flood corridor model. People were listening now, not because of a title but because of the fight. Still, not all messages were professional. One subject line froze her. "I didn't expect it to go that far." It was from Lena. Elena hesitated, then clicked it open. The message was short. "I was wrong. I thought I could control it. I thought you wouldn't push back. But you did. I've left the firm. I've also left the city. I won't ask for forgiveness. But I wanted you to know, I'm done pretending." There was no attachment. No explanation. Just a digital shadow trying to leave quietly. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then deleted it. She had no room left for ghosts. Back in Seattle, things had changed. Marcus was now lead architectural strategist. Tanya had joined the design operations team. And Elena, from her glass-walled corner office, had begun mentoring new hires. She showed them not just how to draw, but how to protect what they drew. How to leave a digital fingerprint. How to speak up early. And how to build not just for clients but for themselves. One afternoon, Isabel, the junior architect who had written to her, brought in a model shaped like a bridge. "It connects a floodplain to a hillside," she said nervously. "I know it's different from our typical style, but I wanted to try something that could work for my own hometown." Elena smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "It's beautiful," she said. "Tell me everything." She sat down beside her, not as a director, but as someone who remembered what it meant to be silenced, and what it meant to be heard again. Outside, the rain fell quietly. Inside, something new was beginning. Just as the dust began to settle, a sleek envelope arrived at Elena's office addressed in embossed silver lettering. It bore the insignia of Vanguard Development Group, one of the most influential urban development consortiums on the West Coast. She stared at it for a moment, fingers pausing mid-keystroke. Vanguard didn't send letters, they made phone calls, sent assistants, booked meetings through 5 layers of scheduling. An envelope meant one thing. Something personal. Inside was a letter from Dr. Silas Brennan, Vanguard's founder and CEO, known for reshaping entire coastal cities. The letter was complimentary, congratulatory, impressed by her keynote, her resilience, her leadership. And then the offer. A newly created role. Vice President of Sustainable Design at Vanguard. Salary. Double her current compensation. Resources. Unlimited. Autonomy, guaranteed. Only one catch. She would have to leave Verona Innovations, and all claims to the Portland project behind. Elena stared at the final line. "To move forward with us, we ask that you step back from your previous disputes and allow history to take its course undisturbed." She closed the letter gently. The irony was sharp. After months of fighting for her voice to be heard, she was now being asked to accept a louder platform, as long as she stayed quiet about the past. That evening, she met Marcus for drinks at a quiet rooftop bar. The city buzzed beneath them, lights like veins of energy winding through the concrete below. "They want your brilliance," Marcus said, sipping his drink. "But not your truth." "Exactly," Elena murmured. "And that's what got me here in the first place, truth. Not just talent." "You don't need their title to make a difference," he said. "But I'd have reach," she countered. "And if you take it at the cost of your story, what would you actually be reaching for?" The next day, Elena didn't respond to the offer. Not yet. Instead, she went back to her desk and resumed work on a small side project, one that had been buried beneath the chaos. A community center for single mothers in Tacoma, built with storm-resistant materials and child-safe zones, modeled loosely on her own experiences growing up with little support. She presented the concept to the city council the following week. Her pitch was raw, personal, and powerful. When she finished, one of the council members said quietly, "We didn't know we needed this until you showed us why we did." That night, Vanguard followed up. This time it wasn't a letter. It was a video call. Dr. Brennan himself appeared on the screen. His office minimalist, his voice deep and calm. "Elena," he said, "I want you to understand something. This role was created for you. But large organizations move better without entanglements. You're free to tell your story. Just not with us." Elena tilted her head slightly. "And what happens when the next generation of designers watches me stand silently in that position, unsure how I got there or what I gave up?" He smiled politely. "That's the cost of scale." He smiled back. "Then maybe scale isn't what I'm after." The call ended. No contract was signed. Instead, Elena wrote something else, an op-ed for a major design journal titled "Theft is not a strategy. Why attribution must live at the core of innovation." Spread quickly. The article detailed the mechanics of design appropriation in the professional world, anonymized but cutting deep into industry habits. She cited watermarks, power imbalances, and the cultural silence around who really creates the work behind the awards. Dozens of firms reached out after publication. But the most unexpected email came from a familiar address, Urban Core's legal team. Subject: misrepresentation in prior agreements. They had begun an audit, not just of Verona, but of other firms Lena had previously worked for. 3 additional designers had come forward. Stories eerily similar. Designs appropriated. Attribution denied. Promotions stalled. The dominoes were falling. And Elena realized something profound. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a pattern, culture, system built on silence. And she had broken it. Not for applause. Not for a title. But because truth had finally found its voice. And it refused to whisper ever again. It was nearly midnight when Elena found herself alone in the Verona conference room. The same room where Lena once stood and claimed someone else's work as her own. Now, the lights above buzzed gently, casting a warm hue over blueprints scattered across the table. She wasn't there to revise another design. She was there to remember. So much had changed in just a few weeks. And yet, something in the silence gnawed at her. 3 new names had come forward since Urban Core's legal audit began. Designers from Lena's earlier career, each with disturbingly similar stories. A concept presented to a client. A supervisor who took over. An inexplicable shift in credit. They had stayed silent, not because they didn't know what happened, but because they thought no one would care. Now they were watching Elena, not just as a symbol of victory, but as someone who had spoken out when they hadn't. And she could feel it. The weight of their guilt passed to her without words. Earlier that day, she received an anonymous envelope in her Verona mailbox. Inside was a single printed email chain between Lena and a former senior architect at a now-defunct firm. The tone was casual, almost smug. "She'll never say anything. They never do. That's the beauty of this system. No signature. No return address. Just a date. 5 years before Lena had ever stepped foot in Verona." Elena stared at the paper for a long time, then burned it. She didn't need more proof of what had already crumbled. But it did raise a question that sat heavy on her shoulders. Why had no one spoken up sooner? The answer arrived the next morning when Gregory Stone knocked on her office door, looking older than she remembered. "I've been asked to step down," he said without preamble. Elena blinked. "The board. They're calling it a transition," he said, voice brittle. "To restore trust." She said nothing. He sighed and took a seat across from her. "I knew Lena was cutting corners. I suspected she wasn't being fully transparent. But I was tired, Elena. I let myself believe her charm was competence. And I let you take the hit because that was easier than confronting what I enabled. You were the gatekeeper," she said quietly. "And you left the gate open." He nodded. "I'm sorry," he said. "But I don't expect that means much." "No," she said. "It doesn't. But hearing it still matters." As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "You should know something. After you presented your evidence, the board quietly went back through other projects. You weren't the only one she erased. But you were the first who made it impossible to keep ignoring." She watched him go without saying goodbye. Later that week, Elena gathered her team: Marcus, Tanya, Isabel, and the handful of new interns she had begun mentoring. She handed them a new initiative she had developed with Urban Core's advisory team, a creative integrity charter. It included clear project attribution protocols, metadata preservation standards, mandatory shared credit systems, and a firm-wide mentorship pairing system to support junior designers navigating career growth and ethics. "This isn't about revenge," she told them. "It's about protection. About leaving the door cleaner than we found it." They all nodded. But not everyone was ready to rebuild. One senior architect, Mark Doran, who had supported Lena's rise early and turned a blind eye to her manipulation, resigned quietly days later. Another, Melanie Briggs, who had once publicly doubted Elena's credibility, asked to meet privately. "I didn't believe you," Melanie admitted. "I thought you were bitter, difficult. I even repeated that behind your back." Elena said nothing. Melanie looked down. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry." "I accept your apology," Elena said. "But that doesn't erase the damage." "No," Melanie whispered. "But maybe it plants something better." In the weeks that followed, the firm transformed in small but meaningful ways. Credit pages on the website were updated. Past contributors reached out with renewed interest. And Isabel's community bridge model was greenlit for early-stage prototyping. And in Elena's inbox, a final unexpected message arrived. From Lena. No apology this time. Just one sentence. "The silence wasn't yours to break, but thank you for breaking it anyway." Elena read it once, then archived it. Because her voice wasn't just loud now. It was permanent. The invitation arrived in the form of a phone call. Unexpected, direct, and somehow more daunting than any letter. It came from the American Council of Urban Designers, a prestigious body Elena had long admired from afar but never imagined standing before. They wanted to award her, not just for the Portland waterfront project, but for her role in advancing ethical innovation and authorship integrity in architectural practice. Sounded noble, final. A recognition crafted to fit neatly into a press release. But Elena hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted her name tied to an award that now risked erasing the struggle that led to it. Pain. The betrayal. The quiet victories that no plaque could capture. Still, after days of silence, she accepted. The ceremony was scheduled for late autumn, in a converted railway museum outside Washington, D.C. It was to be a formal affair. Black tie televised with guests flown in from across the country. Elena stood before her hotel mirror in a deep navy dress, the same color Lena once wore to claim Elena's success. But now the reflection was hers alone. The gala was luminous, golden chandeliers swaying above, the air filled with violin music and practiced laughter. When her name was called, Elena walked across the stage to a standing ovation. But what she said in her speech was not what anyone expected. "I'm grateful," she began. "Not just for the honor, but for the opportunity to speak about something that doesn't often make its way onto stages like this. She paused, meeting the eyes of the audience. Innovation is fragile. Ideas are delicate. And the act of creation is deeply personal. But in our industry, we often allow convenience to replace integrity. We mistake charisma for originality. We reward output without asking about process. Another pause. The room held its breath. I stand here because I fought, not just for credit but for clarity. For every designer who's been overlooked. For every sketch that was claimed by someone louder. I didn't ask for this battle. But I won't pretend it wasn't real. And I won't pretend it's over. She ended her speech with quiet dignity, stepping off the stage without a single glance back. After the ceremony, an older man approached her. His name was Lucian Gray, a founding member of the council. I've been on this committee for 30 years, he said. And I've never seen someone use an acceptance speech as a reckoning. Then maybe it was overdue, Elena replied. He smiled. Perhaps. But you've started something we can't ignore now. Back in Seattle, Elena returned not to celebration, but to continuity. Her team had continued building, drafting, refining. Isabel's bridge was now in early community testing. Marcus had secured a grant to study rapid assembly shelter pods based on Elena's flood zone models. And in a surprising turn, Urban Corps offered to fund a mentorship initiative, named the Rivera Fellowship, for underrepresented voices in architectural design. She approved it with one condition: no ceremonies, no fanfare. Only names. Only stories. Meanwhile, whispers of Lena's past had reached other cities. At least one firm publicly rescinded a pending contract after a junior designer raised concerns. Lena had vanished from the press. But not from consequence. Elena didn't speak of her anymore. There was no need. One morning, as the city shimmered under rare Seattle sunlight, Elena walked into a community meeting where a young girl stood next to a 3D printed model of a school made entirely of recycled water-resistant polymers. The girl pointed at her proudly. She's the one I told you about, she said to her classmates. She's why I want to be an architect. Elena knelt beside the girl and smiled. What's your project called? She asked. The girl grinned. The Safe Place. And in that moment, Elena felt something deeper than recognition. She felt return. Return of her name. Her voice. Her truth. Not as a headline, but as a legacy. It was raining again in Seattle. Thin, unrelenting, a whisper across the windows of the new design lab that bore her name. Not a monument. Just a clean, bright space with wide tables, plenty of light, and walls covered in sketches from interns, community teens, and visiting architects alike. The Rivera Design Lab had opened quietly but filled quickly. Elena stood by the tall windows, watching the city breathe beneath the mist. It had been 10 months since the hearing, 9 since the award, 8 since Lena had disappeared from the public eye completely. There were rumors, of course, new ventures abroad, consulting jobs under aliases, even teaching positions under different credentials. But nothing confirmed. That wasn't Elena's concern anymore. Today, she had invited someone unexpected. Tanya, the last person Elena expected to hear from after the Portland scandal, had reached out through a simple email. I have a story I need to tell, and I want to tell it to you. Now, Tanya sat across from her, looking older, leaner, with none of the high-strung poise she once wore like armor. Her hands rested on the table. No phone, no watch, no distractions. I didn't know how bad it was, she began. With Lena. With a firm. With everything. I thought you were just dramatic. Elena said nothing. I saw things, sure. But I justified them. We all did. And when you got pushed out, I told myself it was your fault for not playing smart. For not being careful. She looked up, guilt plain in her eyes. But I see now. You weren't careless. You were brave. Elena leaned back, arms folded loosely. Why now? She asked. Tanya exhaled slowly. Because I want to do better. And because I know you're building something that matters. There was silence. Then Elena said, "I'll offer you one thing. Volunteer role. No title. No spotlight. You do the work, earn the trust, show the kids here what ethics actually looks like." Tanya didn't flinch. "That's more than I deserve. I'll take it." Later that day, as the lab buzzed with quiet activity, Elena returned to her office and pulled out the last item left from the trial, an envelope she had never opened. It had been mailed to her by a stranger, postmarked from a city she had never visited. Inside was a short letter. No name, no return address. "You don't know me. But I watched from the sidelines as they erased you. I didn't speak up then. But I see you now. And because you stood tall, I finally told the truth at my firm. You changed something. Even if you never see it." Elena closed the letter gently, then picked up a pen. She began drafting the outline for a new workshop. Asterisk asterisk the line between silence and truth asterisk asterisk, for high school students interested in design. The premise was simple. Every building starts with a line. And every line must be drawn with intention. Across town, the first phase of the waterfront project was unveiled. It wasn't flashy, but it was functional, beautiful, human. Elena's name was etched into a corner panel, not as lead architect, not as creative director, but as founder of Integrity Initiative. The line etched beneath it read, "Ideas belong to those who bring them to life." She didn't attend the ribbon cutting. Instead, she walked through the streets of the city she had once almost left, past bridges and buildings she once helped shape, past voices that had once doubted her, past silence that once nearly swallowed her whole, and into a future she had designed with her own hands. No more names stolen. No more lines crossed. Only the truth. And the woman who dared to draw it.